Warning disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life emotions, complicated relationships, and human vulnerability. The characters, events, and settings depicted are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. This story is intended for mature audiences who appreciate emotional storytelling and nuanced romantic drama. Viewer discretion is advised. Anna Monroe had always dreamed of a quiet life, and after her divorce 2 years ago, she finally had it, or at least some version of it. Maple Street was a quiet, tree-lined corner of a small town in upstate New York where houses had picket fences. Neighbors waved from across the yard, and no one really asked too many questions. After ending a 15-year marriage with a man who gradually stopped seeing her, both emotionally and physically, Anna was more than content to enjoy solitude. She tended her flowers, read mystery novels in the evening, and baked more than she could eat. Her days were peaceful, if sometimes a bit too quiet. It was the start of summer when she noticed the Hendersons' old minivan pulling into the driveway next door. They'd been her neighbors for over a decade, though they kept to themselves. Out of the van stepped a tall, lean young man with deep-set eyes and slightly disheveled dark hair. Took her a moment to realize that was Jake, the same boy who used to ride his skateboard up and down the sidewalk, who used to deliver her paper and sneak extra cookies from her holiday batches. But he wasn't a boy anymore. He was 19 now, just back from his first year of college. And while Anna hadn't thought of him in years, something about the way he looked at her that day made her chest tighten. Jake greeted her with a friendly smile and a mature ease she didn't expect. "Hey, Ms. Monroe," he said. "Long time." She laughed nervously, brushing off the strange flutter in her stomach. "You're not that kid anymore," she replied. "Should I still call you Jake?" He grinned. "It's still me, just a little taller." In the weeks that followed, Jake became a regular presence. His parents were busy with work and often out of town, so he helped her with errands, took out her trash bins, and occasionally joined her for iced tea on the porch. At first, Anna thought nothing of it. She appreciated the company and chalked up his kindness to neighborly duty. But as their conversations grew deeper, filled with laughter and stories about college life and her past mistakes in love, something inside her shifted. Anna wasn't looking for love. She wasn't even looking for companionship. But Jake made her laugh in ways she hadn't in years. He noticed small things, when she changed her nail color, or when she trimmed her garden hedge just a little too perfectly. And while Anna told herself this was just a passing connection, harmless and innocent, a tiny voice inside whispered otherwise. Something was stirring. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. She had no idea the summer would change everything. The days stretched long under the golden summer sun, and with each passing afternoon, Anna found herself looking forward to the simplest moments: casual greetings, shared jokes, and the warm, familiar presence of Jake. What started as neighborly gestures evolved into something softer, more personal. Jake would show up with an extra smoothie when he ran errands. Anna would leave fresh-baked muffins on his porch. Their interactions, though unspoken in meaning, were starting to build a quiet rhythm neither of them openly acknowledged. It wasn't just about the favors anymore. They began talking, really talking, not the surface-level chatter of small-town neighbors, but conversations that dipped into memories, regrets, and dreams. One late afternoon, sitting beneath the old oak tree between their yards, Jake asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before everything?" Anna, caught off guard by the question, paused. Then she smiled faintly. "All the time," she whispered. "But I've also grown used to who I am now. Quiet, cautious, maybe a little lonely." Jake didn't offer pity. Instead, he nodded, as if he understood more than someone his age should. He spoke about college, how it wasn't everything he thought it would be. The pressure, the shallow friendships, the constant noise. He said being back home felt grounding. Anna wondered if she was part of that feeling for him. Their comfort with each other grew almost accidentally. On one humid evening, the AC in Anna's house stopped working. Jake helped her bring in a fan from his garage, and they ended up sitting together on the floor of her living room, sipping lemonade, laughing at old sitcoms. When she laughed too hard at a punchline and leaned against him without realizing, he didn't move. He just let her stay there for a moment. Anna found herself dressing with more thought. She never used to care about how her hair looked when tending the roses, but now she caught herself reapplying lip gloss before heading outside. She hated the feeling of self-consciousness, but also couldn't deny the thrill of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. And Jake? Jake wasn't just polite anymore. His eyes lingered. He complimented her smile. He listened like her words carried weight. Still, nothing overt happened. There were no declarations, no lines crossed. Just moments. Delicate, undefined moments filled with a heat they both refused to speak of. Anna told herself it was just a phase, a fleeting bond brought on by proximity and summertime haze. But deep down, she feared she already knew the truth. Whatever was unfolding between them, it was no longer innocent. As July settled in, the energy between Anna and Jake grew charged, like static before a summer storm. Still, nothing had been said, no boundaries had been crossed. But they both felt it. A silent current pulled at them each time they shared space. Words were no longer necessary to sense the tension building like a slow, deep breath waiting to be released. One late afternoon, the sky threatened rain. Anna was out front, struggling to drag a heavy flower pot to a shaded corner of her porch. Jake appeared at her side before she even called for help. "Let me," he said, grabbing the base effortlessly. She stepped back, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as he lifted the pot with ease. When their fingers brushed during the handoff, it wasn't an accident, and neither of them moved away. "Want to stay for some iced tea?" she asked. She tried to sound casual, like it was just a neighborly offer. Jake accepted with a quiet nod. They sat side by side on the porch swing, watching the dark clouds roll in. It was peaceful at first, like the dozens of other moments they'd shared. But something shifted when the rain began. Fat, warm drops tapping against the wood. Anna laughed and kicked off her sandals to run barefoot into the yard. Jake hesitated, then followed, and for a while, they danced in the downpour like two kids breaking free from gravity. Soaked and breathless, they returned to the porch. Anna grabbed a towel and handed it to him, their fingers again lingering longer than needed. He took the towel but didn't dry off right away. He just looked at her, eyes dark, searching. "You look different when you laugh like that," he said softly. "Lighter." Anna turned her face away, heart hammering in her chest. That night she couldn't sleep. She replayed the way Jake looked at her, the warmth of his hand on her wrist, the subtle shift in his voice. It was dangerous. She knew it. He was younger, her neighbor's son. She'd watched him grow up. But the way he looked at her now was not the way a boy looks at a family friend. It was the way a man looks at a woman he wants. The following days were filled with glances that lasted too long and silences too heavy. When Jake brought over a movie to watch, they sat on the couch with a space between them at first, until gradually that space disappeared. His knee touched hers. She didn't move. Neither did he. No lines were crossed, not yet. But their hearts were teetering on the edge. Every word they didn't say, every touch they didn't pull away from, made the boundary between them blur even more. Something was coming. They both knew it. And it was only a matter of time before it would become undeniable. The day had started like any other, with warm sunshine and the faint scent of jasmine drifting through the open windows of Anna's kitchen. But by early evening, thick clouds had gathered above Maple Street. The forecast warned of a summer storm, and by nightfall, a power outage had swept across the neighborhood. Anna stood in her kitchen, holding a flickering candle, when she heard a gentle knock on her door. It was Jake. "Lights out at my place too," he said, holding up a flashlight. "Thought I'd check on you." "Come in," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. There was a strange tension in the air, more electric than the storm itself. The house was dim, lit only by a few candles scattered across the living room. Anna poured them each a glass of wine, and they sat near the window as flashes of lightning cut across the sky. Outside, the world was drenched and chaotic. Inside, it was calm, almost too calm. Their conversation started harmlessly. Talk of childhood blackouts, funny stories, ghost tales. But as the wine loosened their nerves, their words turned more personal. Anna found herself telling him about her marriage, how it had slowly turned into silence, how being alone had become easier than being misunderstood. Jake listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving hers. "You deserve more than silence," he said after a pause. "You deserve to feel seen." Those words struck a chord so deep that Anna couldn't breathe for a moment. And in that stillness, Jake reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. His fingers were warm and steady, and the weight of the moment pressed down on them both. When she finally looked up, he was closer. His voice was barely a whisper. "Can I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "Do you feel this too? Or am I completely alone in it?" Anna's breath caught. Her instinct was to deflect, to laugh it off, to retreat behind years of caution and self-control. But she didn't. "I feel it," she whispered. "I've been trying not to." Jake leaned in slowly, giving her space to stop him. She didn't. Their lips met, soft, tentative, testing a boundary that had long been blurred. The kiss deepened, filled with unspoken longing. For a fleeting moment, it was just two souls reaching for comfort, for connection, for something real. But the moment shattered as quickly as it came. Anna pulled back, her chest heaving. "This isn't right," she murmured, standing up abruptly. "You should go." Jake stood, too, his expression unreadable. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, picked up his flashlight, and walked to the door. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't," she replied, eyes brimming. "That's the problem." When the door closed behind him, Anna stood alone in the candlelit room, heart pounding. The silence that followed was louder than any thunderclap. That night had changed everything, not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. There was no going back now. The morning after that night, everything felt wrong. Anna sat at her kitchen table, her untouched coffee cooling beside her as she stared out the window at the Hendersons' driveway. Jake's car was there. She thought maybe he'd come over. Maybe he'd knock on the door and try to explain, to talk. But he didn't, and neither did she. In the days that followed, their easy rhythm vanished. Jake no longer showed up unannounced. The swing on her porch sat empty. When she passed by their yard and caught sight of him from a distance, he would offer a faint, almost reluctant nod, nothing more. It stung more than she wanted to admit. Anna tried to go about her life as if nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. Her home, once filled with calm solitude, now felt like a box echoing with what-ifs. Every corner reminded her of him. The kitchen where they'd laughed. The porch where their hands had brushed. The candlelit room where their lips had met and her world had tilted. The guilt crept in fast. She kept telling herself it was a mistake, that she had let a moment of loneliness and vulnerability get the better of her, that Jake was just a young man confused by attention, by emotion, by the thrill of something forbidden. But the more she tried to rationalize it, the more her heart rebelled against the logic. One afternoon, she saw Jake walking toward his car with a girl beside him, blonde, young, college-aged, laughing easily at something he said. Anna's heart sank. She turned away quickly, but not fast enough. Jake had seen her watching. Their eyes met, just for a second, but it was long enough for her to feel the sharp sting of jealousy and the heavier ache of loss. That night she cried, not just because she'd been rejected, but because of what she had allowed herself to feel, something she hadn't allowed in years. Real affection, real closeness, and it had come at the worst possible time with the most impossible person. She questioned everything. Was he just playing along? Did she imagine the connection? Was it all in her head? The regret hit hard, not because she had feelings for him, but because she hadn't had the courage to face them honestly. She had shut him out, told him to leave, made him believe what they shared was wrong. But was it? Alone in the dark, with nothing but her thoughts for company, Anna whispered the question she had been avoiding since that night. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if it was the beginning of something real, and I pushed it away out of fear? She didn't have the answer yet, All she had was silence. And the growing realization that silence, once her sanctuary, had now become her prison. It had been nearly a week since they last spoke, but it felt like months. The silence between them had grown thick and unbearable, like a wall neither dared to break. Anna kept telling herself that the distance was for the best, that what happened was a lapse in judgment, a fleeting weakness, but her heart wouldn't listen. Each day that passed without seeing Jake only deepened the ache inside her. She tried to busy herself, deep cleaning the house, baking more than she could eat, rearranging the living room furniture twice. But nothing distracted her from the gnawing sense of unfinished business. There was no closure, only absence and doubt. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed Maple Street in an amber glow, Anna heard a knock on the door. She froze. When she opened it, Jake stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes shadowed by a mix of frustration and something softer hurt. "We need to talk," he said. Anna stepped aside without a word, letting him in. He stood in her living room like he'd never been there before, like he was trying to remember if he still belonged. "I know I crossed a line," he started. "But I need to know. Did that night mean nothing to you?" Anna's breath caught. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said. "You're my neighbor's son, Jake. You're 19. "I'm not a kid," he said sharply. "And I didn't kiss you because I was confused. I kissed you because I care about you, because I've cared for a while now." She looked away. "Jake, I'm older. I've lived a different life. People would talk. They'd judge. They'd call it wrong." Jake stepped forward. "So what? We live in a world where people fall in love for all kinds of reasons. And yes, this is complicated. But I'm not ashamed of how I feel. Are you?" That question hit harder than she expected. Was she ashamed? Ashamed of wanting affection again? Of feeling alive? Of being seen, not as a mother or a divorcee or a lonely woman, but as someone worth loving? "I'm scared," she finally admitted. "Not of you, of what this could mean, of what I could lose." Jake's voice softened. "You don't have to be afraid. I don't need promises or answers. I just need to know if you feel what I feel, because I can't pretend like nothing happened. I won't." The silence stretched between them, thick with emotion. Then Anna walked closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. "I felt it," she whispered, "every second of it, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Jake looked at her, searching her face for hesitation. But there was none now, just truth. "Then let's stop pretending," he said. And just like that, the wall between them cracked. Not shattered, not crumbled, but cracked enough for something real to step through. That night marked a quiet shift in Anna's heart. After Jake left, she sat on her porch for hours, watching the sky fade from deep orange to indigo. The air was still, heavy with the weight of unspoken possibilities. She didn't feel giddy or reckless, just awake in a way she hadn't been in years. For the first time, she wasn't running from her feelings. She was sitting with them, letting them stretch out inside her chest like vines reaching toward sunlight. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror with new eyes. She saw the lines at the corners of her mouth, the tiredness under her eyes. But she also saw softness in her expression that hadn't been there before, a quiet sort of glow. She wasn't 20 anymore, and she didn't want to be. But she was still a woman who could feel, who could want, who could be wanted. Still, the fear lingered. What would people say? Her neighbors, her friends. What would they think if they knew she had feelings for a man nearly half her age? Would they see her as desperate? Would Jake regret it in a year or two? Would she become just a phase in his journey? These questions haunted her, until she decided to talk to someone she trusted. Her best friend, Elise. Elise was the type of friend who never sugarcoated things, and Anna needed honesty now more than ever. Over coffee in Elise's kitchen, she confessed everything. From the porch conversations to the kiss to the stormy silence that followed. Elise didn't flinch. She didn't gasp or scold or laugh. She simply listened. When Anna finally finished, heart pounding, Elise reached across the table and held her hand. "You're allowed to feel things again, Anna. You're not dead. You're not wrong. You're human. And maybe it's not what anyone expected. but sometimes the unexpected things are exactly what we need. Tears filled Anna's eyes. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until they were spoken. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip, Anna walked slowly to the fence that separated her yard from Jake's. He was sitting on his back steps, headphones in, sketching in a notebook. When he looked up and saw her, he pulled the headphones off, eyes cautious. "I don't have everything figured out," she said quietly, "but I'm tired of being afraid of something that feels this real." Jake stood up, notebook forgotten. "You don't have to figure it all out. We just have to stop pretending it's not there." There were no grand declarations, no dramatic kisses. Just the two of them standing face to face, choosing for once not to hide. Anna wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing now with certainty. She was no longer afraid to feel. The days that followed were gentle but charged with an unspoken energy. Nothing between Anna and Jake was rushed or labeled, but everything felt different. He continued his routines, college, weekend shifts, sketching on the porch, and Anna resumed hers, garden walks, teaching, afternoon coffees. But there was now a subtle rhythm connecting them, like two instruments finding harmony in a quiet duet. They didn't fall into a typical relationship. They didn't go out on dates or post pictures online. Instead, they shared time. Meals on the back porch, laughter over spilled coffee, long conversations under the stars. It was as if they were building something fragile and sacred, something that could only be protected if it remained just between them for now. Anna found herself smiling more. At work, at the grocery store, even alone in her car. It wasn't the kind of smile that needed to impress anyone. It was the smile of someone who had remembered a part of herself that had gone silent for too long. A woman who had mourned, survived, and now dared to love again. Jake, for his part, wasn't trying to prove anything. He didn't try to be older or more mature than he was. He just was open, thoughtful, and warm in a way Anna hadn't experienced in years. He didn't chase her, didn't pressure her. Instead, he allowed her space to breathe while also standing steady beside her. And that was the most surprising part of all. His ability to love her quietly, without need or demand. One rainy afternoon, as they sat side by side watching water streak down the windows, Jake turned to her and asked, "Do you think we'll always be this uncertain?" Anna looked at him thoughtfully. "I think life is always uncertain, but I know how I feel when I'm with you, and that's more real to me than any label or plan." Jake nodded, then leaned his head gently on her shoulder. "Then that's enough for me." Their love didn't roar like the storms of youth. It didn't demand attention or validation. It moved slowly, measured, mature, and deeply felt. It was the kind of love that had grown from real connection, mutual respect, and quiet healing. For Anna, it wasn't about rewriting the rules or proving something to the world. It was about finally listening to her own heart after years of silencing it. And for Jake, it wasn't about fantasy or rebellion. It was about finding someone who saw him, not as a boy next door, but as a person worth loving. As summer turned to fall, the leaves changed, but the bond between them only deepened. What had started with a single night of emotional vulnerability had evolved into a story neither of them had planned, but both were grateful to live. It wasn't conventional. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. And for both of them, that made all the difference. 35.